Did you or a loved one suffer through Game 82 of the Pittsburgh Penguins season against the New York Islanders? Well, you may be entitled to financial compensation.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back, Penguins fans, to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym4wet. Joined as always by my co-host Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can toss the show's Twitter account a follow at LO_Penguins. And we thank you for making this your first listener watch of the day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. So just got to be clear, the cold open was a joke. There is no class action lawsuit against the Pittsburgh Penguins for their final game of the season. Just having a little bit of fun at the end of what has been a treacherous and long season for us as Penguins fans. And it ends the exact same way that it began, with a blown lead. This time they lose 5-4 to the New York Islanders on the island in Game 82. And this was actually kind of a fun game to watch. I know I'd made the joke, but I mean, all things considered, for a game that meant absolutely nothing to either team, Penguins out of the playoffs, no chance to get in. Islanders have the third seed in the Metro locked up. They're moving on to play the Carolina Hurricanes in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But it was a bit of a back and forth affair. There were a bunch of challenges, a disallowed goal, a penalty shot, a blown lead, a bunch of tying goals. And the Penguins had more than 40 shots. The Islanders had more than 30 shots. And it was very much you know what? This game doesn't matter. Let's just go play some shinny out there, boys. And boy, it was kind of a fun watch. What do you think?
Outside of the first 10 minutes, I think the Penguins played fairly well in this game. During the first 10 minutes, it looked like they were just going to go 1-2-3 Cancun and hit the beach on Thursday, because it looked like they had no interest in even playing this game. But after that, those next 20 minutes, I thought the Penguins badly outplayed the Islanders. They were doubling them up in shots at one point in the game. And then, of course, the Islanders pushed back quite a few times after those 20 minutes. And then from then on, it was kind of a back and forth affair. You know, Islanders would score, Penguins would answer back, then the Islanders would score again, then the Penguins would answer back again, and then the Islanders eventually had the game winner in the third period, even though it looked like a couple of times that the Penguins were going to try and squeeze out at least a point from this game. But they didn't go fully quiet into the night. They actually looked like they had something to play for in this game, even though it was a meaningless game for the Penguins. It was also a meaningless game for the Islanders as well. And I think part of that reason was because of Big Jeff Carter. We're going to discuss more about him and how this was his final game in the second segment, but you could tell right from the opening puck drop that they were playing this game to win for him. I know they didn't play that well for the first 10 minutes, but they woke up big time after that. You got Carter the goal, and it was a pretty emotional game, I think, all around for this team, just because Carter is such a well-respected veteran in that locker room. They really wanted to win that game for him, even though they were already eliminated from playoff contention. But yeah, as for an entertainment standpoint, this game really was a lot of fun. You had Patrick Waugh challenging for offsides. You have Mike Sullivan challenging for a stoppage off of a missed high stick. And I do think it was kind of close to a missed high stick. The offside, that was obviously offside, but Patrick Waugh, come on, man. It's a meaningless game. We don't have to do that and take that Pustin goal out. And then you have the penalty shot at the end. This was a peak NHL officiating game all around. And of course, Kelly Sutherland and Wes McCauley are calling it. So all in all, yeah, kind of a fun game to end the season, even though the Penguins didn't get the result.
Yeah, it was. And of course, like you said, you have Kelly Sutherland and Wes McCauley, two referees who they may not be the best referees, but I will give them this. They're at least entertaining. They at least will make funny calls when they put the microphone on. They will give it right back to the players who give it to them. And annoying as that may be as an NHL fan because of how inconsistent officiating is, like we said, from an entertainment standpoint, it's fun. And I mean, I got to say, hearing about it on the broadcast and then watching it, I mean, two players, one from each side, I think just kind of hope that they could play 82 games a year against one another. That's Samuel Bolduc of the Islanders. He has 2 goals to end the season, both of which came against the Penguins. And Valtteri Puustinen got his 5th goal of the season. He has 3 against the New York Islanders. So both of those guys probably going into the locker room after the game and thinking, man, if I could just play 82 games against this team, I'd be scoring at an 82 goal pace.
Hey, you did forget one player when you were talking about those two. Brock Nelson. I know he has over 30 goals this season, but it's always death taxes in Brock Nelson scoring against this hockey team.
I looked it up during the game when he scored, just because I was like, he has to have his most career goals against the Penguins. And it's true. I believe it's 21 after tonight, and that's his career high. And I had a couple people ask me like, well, he's got to like have doubled up against the Penguins if anyone else. And it's actually not true. He loves to torture us. He loves to torture the New York Islanders, New York Rangers, excuse me, who he has 18 goals against. And then for some reason, the Montreal Canadiens, who he has 17 against. So if you're the Penguins, the Rangers, or the Canadiens, and you see Brock Nelson walk into the arena, just pencil him in for a goal.
We can do that anytime goal scorer for FanDuel for all you sports bettors out there overall. But back to the game itself, I think the best line for the Penguins tonight, yet again, Pat, that second line of Bunting, Malkin, and Raquel. They had about a little over 12 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time tonight. Numbers-wise, when they were on the ice, Penguins had 60% of the shot attempts. They split in terms of scoring chances, but they did have 4 high-danger chances for, 3 high-danger chances against, and of course, they do get that goal from Rickard Rakell to end the first period. And I did say this on Twitter. I'll say it on the show here, too. I know Rakell had a really bad start to the year, but he ended the season on a high note, I would think. He did get close to 20 goals overall. That release that he had to beat Ilya Sorokin was really nice. I don't know what the future holds for him going into the offseason. If it were up to me, I would look to dangle him just because I'm not too big of a fan of that contract. But I do like how he ended this season. And if he were to be on this team next season, I wouldn't be surprised if he does get back to over 20 goals for next season. I'm just a little wary about that contract overall. But Bunting was great yet again. Evgeny Malkin, his skating was tremendous. He was setting up chances left and right. He gets that awesome goal right at the side of the net. And to be honest, after seeing a couple replays, it did look like he kicked it in a little bit, but whatever, who cares? It's a meaningless game. No one's going to care at the end of the day. But I just had to shout out that line because I thought that was the Penguins' best line by far yet again.
And in a hilarious twist of fate tonight, the Penguins power play goes 2 for 2, 100%. But then on the flip side, the Islanders power play goes 2 for 3. So it was not a pretty night for either team's penalty kill. But I mean, tonight's game, in all seriousness, fun as it was, entertaining as it was, disappointing as it was to get a loss and another blown lead loss, as they have so many times this season, it was a frustrating game because you watch the way they played. You watch the way the power play operated, and you just can't help but think, where was this all season long?
Right. I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth there. I kind of said something similar during our Wednesday episode. Honestly, they were so inconsistent throughout the first 65 games, and then they turn it on, and it's like, yeah, I mean, if you had just played like this for a little bit more during the season, you would be in the playoffs. But instead, you missed the playoffs for a second straight year by the slimmest of margins for a second straight year. And you go into another offseason with pretty much the same questions that you had heading into last offseason. So again, I concur with you overall. The movement on the power play was great to see. And the zone entries were awesome. That pass to Malkin was also tremendous. It was just such a better power play overall tonight. And I wish I got to see that type of movement from the power play all year long.
We really do. It would have made such a difference in this season, and we'd be getting geared up for the playoffs if it were, but it was not. And like you said, we're going to go into another offseason with a lot of questions, but one of those questions will not be what happens with Jeff Carter. He confirmed after the game that he is in fact retiring, and last night was his final NHL game. And we will talk a little bit more about Jeff Carter, his career, and his impact on the Penguins in the second segment. But before we do that, we are going to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Monopoly Go. I have been told that I am a competitive person, and Hunter, can you confirm that for the listeners?
100%. He is one of the most competitive people that I know.
Yes, I absolutely am. And most people in my life, including you, will confirm that. It is definitely a flaw I have to work on. But my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it, and it's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part of it all, and you know my competitive side loves it, is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like the classic Monopoly, but now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, we're back here on the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am Patrick Damp. That is Hunter Hodes, and it is official. Big Jeff Carter is calling it a career. He basically had the Jeff Carter farewell tour tonight in this game, whether it was, like you said, getting the opening faceoff with Sidney Crosby on his wing, and then late in the game, on a power play with a chance to tie the game, he's on the top power play. He gets the goal that ties the game. And you could see it throughout the game. There was a lot of emotion in and around him. His family was in the building. One of his longtime teammates from when he won the Stanley Cup, Jonathan Quick's family, was up in the suite with his family since he's getting ready for the playoffs. Jonathan Quick, that is, with the New York Rangers. And just a really, really great career for Jeff Carter. I know the last couple seasons he has been a polarizing figure among Penguins fans. I was saying it to you before we hit record. You could see a lot of people tonight finally, I don't want to say come to the realization, because when you're an NHL player on a team that has playoff and even championship aspirations, you're going to get held to that standard no matter what. But you could see a lot of people start to say, hey, listen, he's not to blame for the contract that he signed. You get offered that kind of deal, you're going to sign it. But to Jeff Carter, 19 seasons of 10 or more goals, 4 30-plus goal seasons, won 2 Stanley Cups with the Los Angeles Kings. And when he got traded to the Penguins, I mean, that first season and a half, 2 seasons, man, he was pretty darn good. And it looked like it was going to be a pretty quick and pretty easy career transition and revitalization for him when he arrived.
I remember not thinking that much about the trade at the time. I warmed up to it quite a bit a few years ago, but then all of a sudden he goes out there, plays only 14 games. He has 9 goals and 11 points in 14 games heading into the playoffs, and is then one of the Penguins' best players in that series against the New York Islanders. Every time he had the puck on his stick, it felt like he was going to score. The next season, 2021-2022, when they lost to the Rangers in 7 games, 76 games, 19 goals, 45 points in those 76 games. I mean, he's averaging over a half a point per game. But right when he signed that extension, you could tell that he had lost a little bit of a step. And you're right. You can't blame Carter for taking that money because he's getting over $3 million per year for the next couple of years. Any player in that situation would take that. And I also don't think you can blame Carter for Mike Sullivan utilizing him in situations that he just wasn't able to handle anymore. For example, Pat, last year, he's taking the first face-off in overtime. I'm sorry. I like Jeff Carter as a player. I don't need him taking that opening faceoff in overtime. I also don't need him defending 6-on-5s when you have other better and younger players that are more capable of doing that. I just think Sullivan utilized him wrong in a couple of ways throughout these last couple of years. And that led to me, and I know quite a lot of other people, to be pretty hard on him on social media. That aside, he had one heck of a career. You could tell from the opening puck drop tonight that this was going to be his final game. You said Crosby's on his wing. They put Carter out on the top power play unit looking for that tying goal. The script writers were hard at work tonight trying to get Carter one more goal in his final game. Heck, he was on the ice on the 6-on-5 situation and almost scored the tying goal with less than a minute left. Did you see that cross ice pass by Michael Bunting? That was an awesome pass and but a better save by Sorokin. You could tell they were really wanting to send him out in style. And again, I wish him the very best in the future. I know he lost a step or two these last couple of years, but man, was he fun to watch that first year and a half when he first got traded here.
He really was, and I got to give him his flowers for this season. I know it was another frustrating one. I know it's been the meme amongst our most hardcore listeners that we interact with all the time that I'm the president of the Jeff Carter fan club, and it's all warranted. I accept it. But in a reduced role for a guy who has had the kind of career that he has, he took it in stride. He was a great pro. He was a great role model for some of the young-ish guys in the locker room. And he never seemed to complain or do anything that would make the locker room, I don't want to say toxic because that goes a little too far, but he never really became an issue for any way that we heard. Because a guy like that, the type of career that he had, especially all the way up until, I would say, a season and a half ago, was pretty much a very reliable goal scorer in the National Hockey League. And whether it's just pride or human nature, when that kind of skill diminishes and it's no longer there, it can become really frustrating and it can become really hard to accept. But to his credit this season, he accepted that reduced role and for the most part, I think played it fairly well.
I know the production was down this year compared to last year, but I think overall he was just better this year compared to last year. I know the bar wasn't that high considering how he struggled last year, but you're right. They put him in that reduced role. For the most part, there were still times where Sullivan was deploying him in late game situations that really drove me crazy. But for the most part, they put him on the fourth line and he only got a select amount of ice time per night and he didn't kill them on a nightly basis. So that's really all I can ask for overall. Now, I do have a question for you. Do you think he's a Hall of Famer?
Maybe. I think
it's close.
Yeah, he's one of those guys I think gets in way down the line. He's a guy that I think when you have one of those years where there's certain guys with eligibility, but there's no like true blue Hall of Famer that, you look at it and go, oh, this guy, he's definitely in. He is absolutely in. He's a guy who, when there's kind of a down year for the Hall of Fame, he put together a very long career. He's up there with 30 for his 30 plus goal seasons. He's up there with a lot of guys who are already in the Hall of Fame. So I think that alone, plus 2 Stanley Cups and the longevity, I think way down the line, he gets in. It's not going to be first, second, or even third year of eligibility. It'll be a while, but I do think at some point he will get the call just because you look at the numbers and they are pretty darn good. Add in 2 championships in a long career. The Hall of Fame committee loves that kind of stuff.
Oh, for sure. I do think eventually he is going to get in. Right now, I kind of see him in that Hall of very, very good category, but I do think eventually the committee who votes players into Hall of Fame will eventually vote him in. I don't think it's going to be right away, but I do think there's going to be a day where that comes.
And we know how it is with the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
It's really is the Hall of Very Good at this point because there's a lot of guys who get like, they don't, and this is a whole different discussion for a whole different episode, but it really should be the elite of the elite. But it just isn't. There's a lot of people in there that make you scratch your head. Not that they were ever bad, but you look at it and go, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. But like I said, different discussion, different day. So congratulations to Jeff Carter on one hell of a career. Hope he gets all the best in retirement. And if I'm the Penguins, I'm keeping him around in some capacity, whether it's player development, public relations, whatever, because by all accounts, he loves it here. He's planning to stay here. So I do hope the Penguins give him some kind of role moving forward, however they can. But now we got to start talking about the offseason, and we are going to do that in the final segment of this episode. But first, we got to tell you about our next sponsor, and that is Policy Genius. Everybody knows this for the most part, and if you don't, one day you will learn that choosing a life insurance policy is extremely important for your family, your loved ones, and yourself. But trying to get that right policy is confusing, time-consuming, and it can feel overwhelming. But with Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. I've spoken with plenty of people in my life who are at this point where they're looking into life insurance policies because they're married, they have children, and they want to have that safety net. And they have, in fact, used Policy Genius. And the biggest review I get from them is how easy it is. Policy Genius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. Your work life insurance policy also may not be enough to protect your family's needs, and even worse, it may not come with you if you leave that job. Policy Genius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. And with thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found their best fit for their needs, it'll help you out with everything that you need. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quote and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl. All right, we're back here for the final segment of the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And here we are. The season has officially come to a close. And as we've been saying, a lot more questions than answers. And we did get one answer other than Jeff Carter about what is going to happen with this team. The team announced right after the game that they will hold their end of season media availability with select players and head coach Mike Sullivan tomorrow at 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. And then on Friday at 10 a.m., Kyle Dubas will address the media from UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex. Obviously, both of us will be watching those, and we will get you our reactions from them on our Friday edition. But here's where I want to start with this, because it's been a topic of discussion all season long, and it's one that we have to have here that we're going to obviously have throughout the offseason and as any stories may develop. But we got to start with the people behind the bench. Does Mike Sullivan come back? Does this coaching staff come back? And do you think they should come back, Hunter?
No, if it were up to me as Kyle Dubas, I would cut bait with all the coaches and start fresh. I think it's time to bring in a new head coach, whether that's someone like, just throwing names at the dartboard here, Craig Berube, Dean Evison, Jay Woodcroft, etc. I think it's time for a fresh voice to come in here and to jumpstart this team a little bit. It's the one button they really haven't pressed yet, and I think it's past due at this point. Now, that said, I also won't be surprised if Sullivan does come back based on the way Dubas has been talking about him throughout this season. I mean, he even had a quote, I believe it was during the GM show, well, if you don't have Sully, then you're searching for Sully. So I do think there is a real chance that he comes back. And if he does, you need to have a brand new coaching staff around him. You have to cut bait with both Mike Vellucci and Todd Reardon. I understand that the PK was pretty decent throughout this season. I don't care. It's time for a fresh start there. I've said so many times about Reardon, but you got to let him go this offseason. You have to bring in someone who can bring fresh ideas to the power play and can coach up the defensemen a little bit better as well. That's bare minimum, I think, for this staff. But if we're up to me, I would cut bait with all these coaches. I just don't know if Kyle Dubas sees it that way.
You beat me to it. I was going to say, I think Mike Sullivan is back. I don't think the rest of the coaching staff is back with him. And if I'm Kyle Dubas, my objective this offseason when it comes to coaching is to find somebody who is going to make Mike Sullivan understand his seat is very hot. I know a lot of people, especially people in Boston that I know, love to tell me about how cheap Fenway Sports Group is. And I have to disagree with them a little bit. And I have to say that they are, but around the margins. They're not cheap when it comes to their sport operations departments. When it comes to the actual operations, whether it's staff, whether it's facility, anything that has to do with the actual performance of the team, they spend money. They are willing to spend money. It's everywhere else on the margins that I think you can say they cut costs. But when it comes to personnel, when it comes to staff, when it comes to facility, they will write the check. They will sign the check. They will pay the money. And if I'm Kyle Dubas, I'm looking for one or two coaches to put beside him. I don't know who it is yet because you never know with the coaching carousel in the offseason. We already know that Buffalo let go of some coaches. We know that there's a handful of other teams that have interim coaches that they might not hold on to. So depending on who's available, you have to get somebody on that bench that could realistically not just take over on an interim basis and hold off until the end of next season to become head coach, but somebody who could take over as head coach.
Agreed. I 100% concur with you on that. If you do bring him back, he better be under a major microscope for next season. For example, if this team has a really horrid start out of the gate and you bring him back, that leash better be really short to start next season.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, keeping it on the train of FSG, I do think that at the very least, they're going to honor the beginning of the extension. I don't think that they want to drop him before it kicks in, but I do think that there is going to be a very frank discussion with him that says, all right, your extension is now active. You are now on this contract. The clock is ticking. It's no longer you're here and you're the best coach and we're not going to do anything to get rid of you. It's now, okay, you're on your contract. Now you have to earn it again.
Oh, 100%. And I just want to see him make adjustments to his system for next season. I'm tired of the aggressive pinching. I'm tired of all these cross ice passes when they're trying to skate out of the zone with control. Just, you don't need to play that way overall. Get that out of your system a little bit and scale it back. That's where I want to see a little bit from Mike Sullivan in terms of tweaks to his system for next season. If he's back.
I also think that depends upon what they do with the roster this offseason. If they get players that can better suit that system, I think you can continue with it. But then therein lies the other issue. When he put that system in place in 15-16, he was ahead of the curve. A lot of teams weren't doing it. And it snuck up on a lot of teams. Now a lot of teams play the same system as the Penguins because the Penguins in that era of the 2016 Stanley Cup, 2017 Stanley Cup, they reinvented the National Hockey League. Now it is based on speed. It is a fast league now. It wasn't a slow league prior to that, but there wasn't as much emphasis on it. And now you look at some of the best teams in the National Hockey League, and they are blazing fast. And it has given the Penguins fits over the last couple seasons. So a lot of questions to be answered there. But before we end this show, this episode, we do have to take some time here to thank all of you because we know this has been a frustrating season from the time the puck dropped up until the final buzzer tonight, between the power play, the way it ended, not making the playoffs again. It's been a tough one, but Hunter and I cannot thank you guys enough for joining us on this ride this season. We have tried to make it as fun as we can, despite another frustrating season, but none of it would matter at all without you guys tuning in, listening to the show, interacting with us on social media, sharing the show, hanging out with us in the comment section. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much for supporting our show.
You all are the reason why I continue to do this as a whole. Pat, I can't thank you enough for joining me on this show right before the season last year. I've been looking for someone to bounce ideas off of for quite a while, and I knew that you would be the perfect fit to bring on for the show after doing it solo for a few years. I mean, to be honest, I was kind of getting to the point where I was gassed, honestly, and you kind of honestly reignited my love a little bit for this. And I can't thank you enough for coming on here and doing it with me. To you, the listeners and the watchers of the show, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. The show grew in ways that I never thought it would this year. And I think we have the best listeners / watchers out there as a whole. So thank you all so much. I know the season didn't go according to plan for a lot of us, but I do think if the right moves are made this summer, this team can get back to the playoffs next year. We'll have all the time in the world to discuss potential moves for the offseason. For example, now that Carter's retired, who is going to take his spot? Jansen Harkins is a free agent. There's another spot in the bottom six. Does Jack St. Ivany get the number 6 defensive spot? What happens in net? Does this team need another top 4 defenseman? And I think so. Do they need another top 6 winger so you can move Drew O'Connor down? What about third line center? Because I think they need another 3C. We have all the time in the world for that. But to sum it all up, thank you all so much.
And yes, Hunter, thank you for taking the chance to bring me on the show, because you guys all know, if you've known me long enough, I could talk to a wall about hockey, and I could do it for hours because it's my favorite thing in the world, right there with the Pittsburgh Penguins. But this love fest doesn't mean we're going anywhere. We will be back with an episode on Friday to talk more about the offseason, give our reactions to Sullivan and the players and Dubas's media availability, talk more about what we think needs to happen with the Penguins this offseason. We're also going to keep you up to date on the minor league teams, the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins in their Calder Cup playoffs, and the Wheeling Nailers in the Kelly Cup playoffs. And we also got a lot of offseason content to come, because hockey never stops, baby. It's year round. So thank you, as always, for tuning in to the Locked On Penguins podcast. We will be back on Friday, like I said, to give our reactions to the media availability and have some more offseason discussions. But for now, I am Patrick Damp. That is Hunter Hodes. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and we will be back on Friday.